Before we dive into today's episode, I want to offer a brief heads up. In this conversation, we touch on the topic of suicide, specifically in the context of public figures like Tony Hsieh and Anthony Bourdain, and what it may mean to carry the weight of the world around that others or yourself might not always see. The perspective my guest shares is a spiritual one. It may land differently depending on where you are right now. If you are in a tender place, please take care of yourself as you listen. Support is available. You can call or text 988 in the USA to reach the Suicide Crisis Lifeline, or text HOME to 741741 for the crisis text line. And in Canada, call or text 988. This is available in English and French 24/7. This is a conversation about wholeness, about leadership, and coming home to who you really are. And I'm so glad you are here. Now let's begin.
Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. What if spirituality didn't have to live only on your yoga mat or in a retreat center or somewhere outside of your everyday life? What if it could exist inside boardrooms, businesses, leadership meetings, and inside the decisions that we're making every single day of our lives? Today's conversation explores exactly that question because we sat down with Corissa Saint-Laurent to talk about what it means to bring mysticism into modern day life, not as something abstract or magical or woo, but as something deeply practical. We're talking about what happens when intuition, energy awareness, and spiritual intelligence start entering the spaces that were traditionally reserved for logic, productivity, and the corporate machine. So if you're curious about what it means to become an everyday mystic, someone who can hold both of these worlds at once, you are going to love this conversation with Corissa Saint-Laurent. And if you've felt this tension personally between what it means to be a spiritual person while being successful in the real world, then this conversation might offer you a new perspective to contemplate. And as you listen, you might start noticing something very important. Your energy is shaping everything. Your presence, your nervous system, your emotional patterns that are stored in your body. These are all influencing the way that you show up in your life, in your work, in your relationships, in your families, in how you do life. Your energy shapes everything. Your energy is information, and information is part of our consciousness. Consciousness is presence, and all of this shows up in our nervous system. And this is exactly what Angelica and I have been working on together over the last 6 months, and why we've created this beautiful program that starts on March 28th. It's a 7-week experience called the Radiant Energy Method, where we are going to invite you in to an experiential session to explore exactly how stored emotions, nervous system patterns, and energetic imprints influence not only how you feel, but how your body is showing up in the world, how your health and your vitality are being influenced, and how you can shift that by shifting your energy, your consciousness, your thoughts, and how you interact with what's around you in your own life, in your relationships, and in your habits and behaviors. And so we're going to link the details in the show notes. And if you have any questions or you're curious to find out more, just send me a DM on Instagram at Harmony Slater Official. And be sure to listen all the way to the end of this episode, because I'm going to leave you with a reflection, a question that might completely shift how you are thinking about ways that you can bring spirituality into your everyday life. So stay tuned. This is a conversation you don't want to miss. Hello. Hi, Russell.
Welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. This is your host, Harmony Slater, and your co-host, Russell.
Case.
What are we doing today, Harm?
We are here with our very delightful guest, Corissa Saint-Laurent. Hello, Corissa. How are you?
Hi, Harmony. Hi, Russell. Hi, Poochie.
Yeah,
we've got two of these little fluff balls.
I could just imagine how it feels. Just so soft.
So nice. So nice. Yeah. So people are just getting to know you in our audience here, but you have worked with some major tech brands like Google and some other brands in the Silicon Valley. And yeah, what kind of like shifted for you? Because now you're really into using intuition as leadership and like in this soul space and like from tech to soul aligned leadership and retreat coach and mentor and guide.
What is the cost of growth without soul? I thought that Google, their whole motto was do no harm. But now it looks like every major tech brand is saying do more harm.
You know, Russell, I've been in marketing for long enough to recognize a tagline when I see it. Do no harm is one of those things that I think is really nice to hear, a nice missive, but is empty in so many ways when it comes to the actual work. And so to go back to your question, Harmony, of how did I get here, is that I have always been here. I was just hiding it from within the business realm, my work realm, and hadn't figured out really how to merge my true being with the world of business. And what I'm embarking on now is a full merger, a full Corissa the Mystic out of the closet, speaking about these at leadership conferences, and to anybody within those spaces, whether it's Silicon Valley or just your typical corporate environments, to anyone who has that smidgen of interest in it, because it all starts there. It all starts with that little opening. It did for me. I don't know if it did for you too, but it's that little whisper, that little call, the little nudge, some unanswered question that you start asking that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And for me, that began really early on when I was 16. And now, you know, if I can reach a 50, 60-year-old executive who's starting to have those questions and starting to, one, question their reality, question the nature of reality, and also what they're doing here. And they're in a high level role, running a company like Google or something else within the spaces where they have a large reach, then to me, that's a massive win. Being able to actually bridge those two worlds together in the times that we're living in.
I'm so curious, like these companies, it seems to me like that there's a whole movement and a turn towards bringing spirituality into the business world. And like all of these sort of big conglomerate companies are sort of seeming to kind of like be into New Age spirituality or plant medicine or like all of the things.
I thought the movement was towards white supremacy. That's what I was saying.
That seems to be a counter movement as well.
There's many movements going on at once.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
It seems like a very kind of fractured society that has these different movements going on at once. And sometimes there's, like in the Venn diagram, white supremacists pushing entheogens like psilocybin, and your kind of mind explodes.
Yeah, I think the sign of the times, or the sign of any major shift in the paradigm, are going to be more and more conflicting themes, more and more conflicting and hostile even. And that's, to me, a sign of a shift, a big, big shift happening. Because the more that you start to threaten somebody's reality, the more that reality is going to rise to combat that, keep within their own familiarity, their own normalcy. And so we're seeing that in the world today, of just a lot of conflict, hostility, division. The other side of that is a unity that I see coming that's going to be really beautiful, but we really need this. It's a breaking down period in order to build back up into something that is more harmonious, more cohesive, more unitive. And we just have to live through this, and not just, let's just sit back and live through this, but live through it and do as much as we can to contribute to the positive growth, or to the shifting of the paradigm into a place towards that unity. Because it could absolutely go the other way. I'm not a fortune teller. It could certainly go in that other direction of just complete destruction and just everything falling apart, the apocalypse, and we're done. But there is the great potential, and I think that as equal a possibility of it becoming more unified. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Do you think that there is sort of this like collective sort of like more wide open acceptance, though, of using intuition or like tapping into energy or guides, or I don't know, using astrology, or like I keep seeing, and maybe it's just my algorithm, but like all of these big businesses talking about using astrology for their business plan, basically, or different things like that. Do you think things are opening up in a different kind of way than they have in the past?
Absolutely. And it is also part of that paradigm shift, that there's more exploration going on. There's more openings, or more people stepping through those openings. The openings have always been there. It's just a matter of reaching a critical mass of where people begin to trust it enough of their colleagues, or the people that are, birds of a feather flock together no matter what. And enough of their birds have explored it for them to feel comfortable and safe enough to start to explore it. So there is a tipping point, if you will, that will be reached for those types of practices and that type of methodology, those types of strategies, to be trusted more and more by the mainstream. And just going back to the world of wellness, which right now, wellness is $1 trillion industry. Wellness is in every corporate space. It's not a dirty word anymore. But when I launched my wellness company back in the year 2000, it wasn't even a term. People didn't understand what that meant. It was either healthcare or something that was out in that woo-woo space, and wellness was in that woo-woo space. And now it's not. And so I see a time very shortly, because I believe that timeline's speeding up as well, to where spiritual practices and metaphysical practices, the use of entheogens and things like this, are also becoming more quickly accepted, becoming more normalized faster, and just reaching more people. And that's because people are looking for answers outside of the norm.
Even that we're using the word entheogen and that it's becoming broadly used it's beyond our imaginations in the year 2000.
Absolutely, yeah.
So are you from California? Were you raised in the Bay Area? How did you come to have a wellness business in the year 2000? Like, that's just such an unusual step in the first place.
It was in the city of Los Angeles, but I'm not from there. I grew up in New Hampshire, where wellness was a dirty word.
Yeah.
Literally it was. I literally had to fight my family to get an organic turkey for Thanksgiving. And they couldn't conceive that it was a normal turkey. They kept saying, well, we want a normal turkey. I said, it is the most normal turkey that you can get.
Yeah.
But,
Exactly. It's just a normal turkey. That's what it is.
It's exactly the definition of it. But so New
Mm.
Hampshire wasn't the place, but I was raised there. And I don't know where things exactly split for me. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I was adopted and raised in New Hampshire. Not that my Korean family was necessarily vanguard or at all on the cutting edge of anything, but I just believe that I started questioning things at an early age because my reality didn't make sense. And so when that is in your present reality, your present reality doesn't make sense. I just went out here. Well, what does make sense? Started questioning the programs and the paradigms and the norms that were fed to me, which led to all sorts of experimentation, entheogens, and vegetarianism, and a lot of things that bucked the system and the place that I lived. And then I moved to California, and California is a lot more ahead of the times. And so even then it was a very cutting edge thing to start a wellness company, but it was more accepting there. And people were starting to, they love exploring anything that's weird and different and new. So it wasn't a hard sell, if you will.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I was going to ask if you were part of the Han diaspora. I lived in South Korea for a year when I got out of college, and a classmate of mine, we'd both made the decision to go at the same time. I think she had a Fulbright for traditional folk dance, and I was just teaching English at a Hagwon. But her name was Kate Hershiser from Michigan. She was the Hall of Fame pitcher Oral Hershiser's niece, and she now goes by Kate Hers Ree as a kind of way of undermining what she calls the colonialization of her body. And as really does a lot of kind of fantastic work as an activist for the population who are the traumatized youth of that diaspora. I don't know if there's a question there. I'm sorry, but just as a way of making a bridge to.
There is a whole episode there that we could talk about in regards to that, both the traumatization, the systematic, we could call it colonialization or just theft of children from that in many other countries. It's not just Korea. And how that plays into my story is that I ended up ignoring it into my 30s. Just saying, well, I have a pretty good life. I don't want to know. We're also told, many of us Korean adoptees, and I've learned others around the world are told that you're a Jane Doe. My parents were given my records. It was an assigned birth date and name. They were told I was left at a police station naked with no information, all of which is untrue.
Yeah.
All of which is designed to separate birth parents, birth mothers typically from their children so that you don't mess up what they've constructed, which is a political monetary system that supports it's not just a financial support of that government, it is a saving face type of support. They are so Confucianist, and it's so shameful that women, unwed women, have babies. Like, how dare you get pregnant, or how could you get pregnant out of wedlock? It's like, well, it's pretty easy. Happens pretty regularly. And the system there is not designed to support that and in any way. And I'm not about like, oh, let's just support welfare recipients and just keep giving to them. And I'm about meritocracy, and people should show some level of grit and being able to stand on their own 2 feet and not just be given funds and support for the rest of their entire life. But it goes beyond any type of financial support. There is a stigma there that's so harsh that is the child and the mother become pariahs in the society. So it's a very complex issue. Most unwed mothers are not necessarily physically forced, but they are societally pressured to get rid of their children. And some of them, their kids are stolen, to just taken from them. But in my case, my mother was pressured to give me up, and that led me to New Hampshire.
Kate was stolen and offered to Christian. Well, she calls them white supremacists, but it's a double-edged sword, because I know we want to get back to the sheep. But I just want to say that I really very much was profoundly influenced by Kongja and them, Confucius, when I was in Hangul, and I found it so that the limits on behavior and the ways of interacting with elders and elder students, like a Sanbei-Hubei relationship, like these were all like profound realizations for me to think about as just a feral American, like I just with no idea how to interact with others. And like it was very, very helpful. And I just recently gave the Analects to our son as a kind of helpful guideline for him. Because I could see him searching for guidelines of behavior. But then there is this shadow side, which is when it becomes so autocratically oppressive to the individual's needs. And we could use that to transition back to the sheet that we're talking
Back to
about.
wellness.
Back to wellness.
Well,
And leadership.
and maybe this will segue us, all systems are going to break at a certain point where they've reached that level of power and that level of control. We might say, yes, from an autocracy or from a too singularly focused power structure. It's an ebb and a flow of the way that the universe is designed, is that something will expand to the point of where it's going to explode, right? It's like the stars, where eventually it's going to become so big that it creates its own demise. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's a very natural cycle that we go through, move through, that everything moves through. And it is that birth and death cycle that we are living in, and that impacts and is integrated into all things. So that applies to us as humans as we evolve and we explore. The exploration even of our own spirituality carries that with it in a micro and a macro way. In a micro sense, there's limits to the systems within spirituality that have been around for centuries or maybe even not centuries, but have reached a certain level of power. Those are going to eventually hit a point where maybe they don't implode, but enough people recognize within it that this has gained too much power. There's a power imbalance here now. And then they leave, and then they either go start something else, or they just leave it personally themselves and they go start something else. But it is a very natural part of our exploration and our evolution to go through those cycles.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, like in your own cycle, you were trained in marketing. You went into marketing. Is that what you studied in school?
I didn't. No.
You didn't? No.
No. I actually was a pre-med major at UC Irvine. So I was very interested in healthcare, medicine, wanted to be a doctor. But I had to come to my senses at a certain point because I wasn't even practicing Western medicine personally. I had this thing in my head that I wanted to become a doctor. And it fascinated me. It wasn't just, I didn't have those kinds of parents that said, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or nothing at all. I didn't have that, but I was very attracted to it. I was excited by it. I excelled in those types of classes. It was very interesting to me. But come age 16, I started practicing natural medicine. It was when I had my first spiritual awakening. I did and learned how to energetically heal myself. I was in a whole different realm, and yet I had this executive part of my brain that was saying, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a doctor. And so I entered college as a pre-med major, still with that track running. And then this other side of me going, what the hell are you doing, Corissa? What's going on? Wake up, wake up. And finally I got the smack, woke up and said, oh yeah, what am I doing? This is not me. This isn't reflective at all of who I really am anymore. So I changed tracks, but it was late in the game and I didn't really know what to do. I needed to graduate. I went and studied abroad. I had to choose a major in order to finish my acceptance to my study abroad program. So I just picked something that was interesting, but not anything I knew I would ever go into. And that was environmental analysis and design,
Wow.
School of Social Ecology. Very fascinating. I also minored in linguistics and philosophy. I was studying all sorts of things that I enjoyed. So I do not discount the experience, but it was formative for my own personhood, but not for my career. Not for me professionally, unless we can call pivoting a really strong asset in the career world, because I was doing a lot of that. And I fell into marketing because I ended up after graduation going to an Eastern school for healing. So I followed the healing path, but in my Eastern roots, and became fascinated with and finally focused more upon energy medicine and Eastern healing methodologies, became a practitioner. And that's what my first company was in. That I launched a business in Los Angeles I call it the wellness space because that's what was it was the only way I could package what I was doing, even though, again, that wasn't even a term back then. But I could bring these types of well-being, relaxation, stress relieving kinds of retreats into corporate spaces and into the Hollywood industry spaces. So I did green rooms and back of the stages of these big Hollywood award ceremonies and all sorts of fun, interesting vanguard spaces where they're like, cool, yeah, let's do it. we'll try that. And I would bring in these, and in California or LA specifically and San Francisco, both very much ahead of the game as far as metaphysical exploration went. So many gurus from the East landed on the West Coast and launched movements there, right? As you know, and being a yogi, so much came through the West Coast and then infiltrated the rest of the country. So there were already many things happening there. And I got to be part of another, maybe a second wave, if you will, of that. So all of that being said, when I had that first company, I really fell in love with the marketing side of it, the PR aspects of it. And I moved back to the East Coast where, as we know, as we've talked about, not a space for wellness, spirituality, metaphysics, anything woo-woo. It was like I'd get punched in the face if I tried to show up with that type of business. It was that kind of environment. And so I pivoted and I opened up a branding and marketing agency.
Wow. Pivoting really was part of your curriculum.
Who I am.
So many pivots.
Like you look at like the mindfulness space and you can see like that all the language kind of arises out of the Eastern resistance to spirituality. It's like, well, we can't say Burmese Buddhism. We can't say those words. We're going to use mindfulness instead. What's his name?
Jon Kabat-Zinn.
Jon Kabat-Zinn is inventing that term to make it more palatable to the Boston medical hospitals. I am really curious, and I know we're running out of time, but for me, the most profound spiritual experience of my life was an awakening at Bongwan San Temple, just down the street from Ewha Women's University in Seoul. Do you have a moment where could you speak to your spiritual enlightenment at 16? Can you describe the events that happened for you?
I can, and I'll try to do them in a truncated way for you. As I mentioned earlier, I was adopted, so I grew up with a very fractured identity, being adopted by white Americans, being completely ripped out of my culture, my family, my language, my food, everything. And there was a lot of trauma there. And I disassociated. I disassociated very easily. It was the only way I think I survived that period of time and was able to thrive, because I did thrive. There are many stories of traumatized children, whether from a transracial adoption or from some other harm struggle in their own actual life to the point of, maybe suicide or all sorts of issues. I excelled in school. I was popular. I had tons of friends. So it wasn't that I was struggling externally, but I was dying on the inside. And that's what so many people don't see, is what is going on inside of people. And this is, I think, what fascinated me about an inner journey in general is this is what I'm presenting out here. And yet I feel ways I couldn't put words to back then, this way inside, like this golem creature felt like a totally different person within. And I was living in this fractured space, living in this dissociated state. And I had a accident. This accident, which I do not consider an accident at all, was a cheerleading accident of all things, but I was dropped. I was actually not caught. So it's a little different than being dropped, but I was not caught in this stunt. And I had a major head injury, traumatic brain injury, skull fracture, complete cervical trauma. And when I was in the intensive care unit, a voice came through me. I was 16, mind you. I knew at that point I wanted to be a doctor, but I didn't have this type of, again, of living this very fractured identity of where I was succeeding in so many ways, but I was just withering away in these other ways. One of those ways was not being able to speak my mind, not being able to speak up to authority. But in the hospital, this voice came through me that spoke for me, and it spoke to the doctors and the nurses, and it questioned everything they were doing. What is that? What pill is that? What is it for? What are the side effects? Is it necessary for my healing? Is it absolutely necessary for my healing? What are you doing to me? Where am I going? What is this machine? What is it doing to me? What are the side effects? And I just was running these poor health officials through this litany of questions every single time they came to my bedside. And I was in the intensive care unit for 2 weeks, battering them with questions. This wasn't me. I mean, it was me. That's the thing I found out later. It was me. It was my higher self. But at the time, it wasn't me who I presented to the world at all. So I just kind of sat there, the me I presented to the world, watching this all go down and just not even questioning it, not being scared, not being worried, not going, who the hell is that voice? I didn't know it was me yet, but I knew that it had my back. I knew that it had my best interest. And I knew that it was a bigger aspect of life that I had yet to discover. I didn't know what it was, but I just completely trusted it. And then that voice came home with me during my healing, because I was home for many months. And I had to lay in my bed. My dad made this makeshift hospital bed where I laid at a 45-degree angle because I had a skull fracture and all the cerebral spinal fluid would just leak out of my brain if I was laying flat. So I had to be up all the time. And I would just lay there, and this voice would guide me through my healing. And it showed me what to do. What I just would say things to myself, visualize my healing. It would tell me what to say. And then that voice melded with my own. It wasn't an external voice anymore. It was my own voice. And it was almost like I needed to learn how to trust it through this whole period of time to know that it was me, because maybe I would have somehow rejected it if it was me, because I didn't think I was that powerful at 16 or at all. And so finally there was this acceptance, like, oh, this is me. This is me who is aware. It's the I am. Again, I didn't have those words for it back then, but it was a profound knowing of that. So that was the big first experience that led to more, but all within, I would say, the caveat of this traumatized and also young person who didn't really know what the hell to do with all of it. So I struggled with my awakening for decades.
Wow. So you said you learned how to heal yourself through your own energy, and then that led you to studying energy work in the East with presumably teachers or a school that you went to?
It was a school
Tell
I
me how
went
that
to.
journey of like learning to use your own energy and then how that led you into this healing and energetic healing type of work.
Because of the trust that I had created with myself, with my own energy, with the energetic realm in general, I knew that there was power in that I was a vessel for that. We all are, but I knew I was called to it. And I was called to this particular school, and it was run by and I know this is why I ended up there, because I had that East-West duality going on. It was run by a former neurosurgeon who had become a shiatsu master. So she went to Japan and learned shiatsu, and then became a shiatsu master, created her own form of shiatsu, among other things. She was fascinating, but she had a depth and a rigor that I appreciated and learned a ton from. And I think because she had that medical background, not that I screened the school for that. I wasn't looking for that at all. It just so happened that the director was this person who embodied this. And then therefore was a bit of a reflection of me and my values or beliefs or energy.
Yeah. And especially the connection of neurosurgeon and your brain injury and like the healing of your neurological system. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what's so interesting is my injury was a long time ago. It was back in 1990. So back then they knew a lot less about the brain and neurology in general, and I had lost my sense of smell. And they said, well, you're either never going to get it back, or you may get it back, but we don't know how it really works. We think another part of your brain just takes over the function of smelling. And that was their answer to me. That was their wisdom at the time. I said, okay, if that's the best you can give me, I will just focus upon that. So within my healing, I focused on that of like, oh, there's a possibility. Oh, I'm going to get this back. This is going to work. And even though I didn't know about, neuroplasticity at the time, I didn't know about neurogenesis, I believed in it. Even though they told me that nerve cells cannot grow back. They said they're dead, they're done, they're gone. And that's what they told me. And I said, no, I don't believe that. So a lot of it comes down to being a rebel against these beliefs that were instilled in me, told by authorities to me, and then saying, no, I see beyond that. I understand, or I feel beyond that. I know something that's different, and I know that there's possibility beyond that. And let me just play with it. So I think it was a trust in the play. I got to personally experience it to then know, well, I want to hone this, study this, be a vessel for other people, and be able to learn from master and be able to bring some of that out into the world.
Wow. So I want to circle back to after you started your marketing company, you shifted again, you pivoted again back sort of into the wellness direction, working with big companies again. How did that happen? What led you into this new field? And now you are leading retreats and doing all kinds of things. So tell us a little bit about where your path has taken you now since, I guess, last pivot, or maybe you're pivoting again right now.
I don't know if it'll be my last. I am always open to all possibilities of where life is going to take me. And the unfoldment is the exciting part. The unfoldment is the living. To me, life is the experience of life rather than, life is this career that's a 30-year path of this. And then it's me being a mom and a wife. It isn't defined by my roles, the things I choose to do for my activities, my where I live, what I wear, and all of these externalities are expressions of this exploration of this internal aspect, it's so funny with words, right? It's an inner journey, and yet that inner journey leads you out into the multidimensional realms. It's this, it's going in to go back out. And so the going in to go back out journey was always going on. It was never not happening. It's just I had gone back to sleep in many ways, thinking, well, I need to have this corporate career. I need to do something more acceptable to others, or where I can make a lot more money doing it. And I went down that road with little consciousness around choosing that path. But I think it was because I was in a state of fear and also hadn't yet explored fully my own healing. The healing journey, which I believe is just the awakening journey, which I believe is just the journey of life, is so multifaceted. It doesn't just happen in one fell swoop, and it doesn't happen in a linear fashion. So I needed to go back to something safe for a while, a place that didn't challenge me as much. It challenged me in other ways, but not in the same inner directional way. And then I learned a lot, tons from that experience, so much about the way that large corporations work, so much the way that the tech industry works, so much about the way that huge teams work. And I gleaned a lot from it. So that period of time was wonderful schooling. I take all of those lessons and apply them now. And what that's allowed me to do is I sort of say, earn the seat at the table in a boardroom with executives to be able to speak their language, to be able to connect and relate and really be that bridge between the business world and this mystical, metaphysical, multidimensional, spiritual space that's not so comfortable for people to explore in that setting. And so I think it is my journey that has led me to have the languaging and led me to have the confidence and the ability, because I've worked with these people in other capacities. I've advised them and consulted them in other ways. And so having that both comfortability for me, familiarity with them, creates that bridge, because you can't necessarily come at them in the robes. You can't come at them, with the sage and the crystals and have them be like, oh yes, we welcome all of this. Like, oh, here you go. Here's tons of money to go institute your programs and your protocols. So there's a bridging language that I needed to learn.
Yeah.
Through that period of time, which just led me back to this period of where I was ready to come back out with my mystical self and be able to speak both languages and be that interpreter.
Yeah, beautiful.
Well, I would really like these podcasts to go for like an hour and a half to 2 hours. Like that would be my
Let's be
preference.
Joe Rogan.
We have a lot more to dig into. You provided us with an absolutely fantastic roadmap for how to talk to you about the strategic intuition. And I feel like we've just gotten through the first one out of 13, 14 here.
To talk about strategic intuition. This is strategic intuition. Everything
I
she
guess,
just said.
But I feel like I have to ask you the closing question.
What's that?
If leaders could walk away with one inner shift, not a tactic, but a way of relating to themselves, what would create the biggest ripple effect in how leaders lead?
It's a twofold answer. It goes into the depth of remembering who they really are, remembering that they are a divine energy that is a product of and not inseparable from all energy and source consciousness that exists everywhere. So we are part of the all. We are the all. So being both part and all of the all is the biggest thing to remember. Once we understand that that's who we are no longer our story. We are no longer our title. We're no longer our roles and our bank accounts and our accumulations and our accomplishments. We have and understand and see ourselves from the depth of who we really are, which is the allness of ourselves. It's the truth of who we are. And if everybody, leaders or not leaders, parents, students, anybody, sees themselves in that way, I believe that is the pathway to no longer struggling with whatever it is they may be struggling with, whether that is leadership decision fatigue, whether that is burnout, whether that is conflict within their teams, whether it is the weight that the growth that they've had has put them into or under, whether it's personal, like addiction or loss and meaninglessness. I am fascinated by people who seem so successful and even happy on the outside who end up killing themselves. I know it's a weird fascination to have, but it's wild to me. And the person that comes to mind is Tony Hsieh, who is the CEO of Zappos, the shoe company, or they started out as only shoes. And they never really, I don't think it was conclusive that he killed himself, but it's very likely that he did. And this is a guy who had it all, had made it all. I mean, you don't become a Zappos and not struggle, but he seemed happy. He wrote a book about it. He seemed at peace and calm and inspirational. And this brings us back to what we were talking about earlier, is that we have the self that portrays to the world or projects to the world, and then we have who we really are. So if leaders can really understand who they really are, then hopefully we can mitigate against the irreversible things that someone might do, like a suicide, in times of high pressure and in times of loneliness and in times of that sort of struggle. Mitigate against smaller things like just being unhappy. I mean, that's not, it's not lesser than, but it's more reversible than certainly a suicide is. And so if we can mitigate against that just by simply understanding who we really are, that is the key. And I'm not saying it's easy to understand who we really are, but that's the life path. That is the living. But it's a path within the living that you choose to go on very consciously rather than just letting life happen to you. So I would say to any leaders listening or anybody carrying heavy weights or doing high impact things in the world is to take that path back into yourself. It's going to lead to so many and more impactful expansions that you can't necessarily see right now, but they are why you're really here.
Beautiful. That's powerful. I love that. The inner journey going outward and coming back to that eternal question, who am I? And connecting into figuring out who you really are, what you really are, beyond your stories, beyond all the things. So that's sort of the human journey, as you say, and the human journey is a spiritual journey, and all the other stuff we do is just to help us understand that, it seems. So I love that message and reminder.
The synthesis that I'll add to this is that, because you mentioned it, the human journey is the spiritual journey, that things is not separated. That's the key.
Yeah.
We are not separate from all aspects of self or from anything here that we are experiencing or anything out there that is unseen. We're not separate from any of it. And so that journey within is finding the wholeness again, finding that oneness again, and leaving that story behind, that we are separate from it all, and or we have to keep all these things in separate silos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Anthony Bourdain is also another example of someone who presents as just completely successful and completely at the top of the game, and also can demonstrate that they've contributed enormously to our human society, and then just one day say, I don't know what happened in that hotel room, but he just decided to snuff it out like the wick of a candle, and it's a tragedy.
Yeah. And it's from a larger, let's say, less human standpoint. We can say, wow, he came here and did his work. He came here and did what he was meant to do here as a soul. He chose to leave when he chose to leave. Like, good on him for making that decision, like outside of the human tragedy of it. But then, what weight of this world was too heavy for him to carry alone. And we never really know that answer. We only can find that out for ourselves, and we can share it. So the more that we have conversations like this, and that's also what fascinates me about it, is just being able to normalize it. Like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about these struggles. Let's talk about what feels completely effed up in your life and in your brain and in your being. Let's have these conversations. None of us are alone in it. And the more that we have them, and I have them on my podcast too, with leaders, celebrities, people that are at the top of their game, and they all reach that same conclusion, not the suicide conclusion. But they
or they wouldn't be talking on your podcast.
Exactly. But they reach that same conclusion of like, this can't be it. This cannot be all there is. I've reached that pinnacle and I'm unhappy, or even less happy than I was before. I feel less whole. I feel more stress fragmented and out of whack, if you will. So, it's in those conversations too, and being able to speak to my advisory clients about this as well, to say, you're not alone. Countless people have reached this place. Let's do this together. Let's actually work through this together rather than keeping this as some sort of individual private secret.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Corissa, and I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us today. And I hope we can do this again.
I'd be happy to come back on. Thank you both so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that I absolutely loved about this conversation with Corissa was the reminder that spirituality isn't something that you just turn on and turn off. It's not something that you experience or engage in when you get on your yoga mat or when you sit down for meditation and then you just go back into your life. But it's something that gets woven into the very way that you're living. It shows up in how you're making decisions. It shows up in your conversations. It shows up in whether you're listening or not to your intuition, to those intuitive hits. And so here's the question I want you to think about today before you run off and get busy in your everyday life. And that is, what parts of your life are you segregating? Are you separating? Are you siloing off from your spiritual self, from your spiritual practice? Where are you segregating? This is spiritual, this is my yoga practice or my meditation practice, and then this is my work or going to the bank or driving my kids to school or cleaning the house or whatever, right? So maybe it's work, maybe it's leadership, maybe it's just like getting busy and absorbed in the mundane tasks that we have to do as humans. But what if you were able to align and integrate and bring these parts together? What would change? How would you show up differently? How would you approach your life in a different way if you really were able to bring that knowingness that you are a spiritual being, having a human experience, into your everyday awareness? And so if this conversation sparked something in you, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a message on Instagram at Harmony Slater Official and tell me what landed. And if you're curious, if you're excited, if you're intrigued by this question and by this train of thought, and you want to know more about how emotional patterns, energy, and nervous system states influence the way that you're showing up in your life, in your business, in your leadership, in your relationships and family, then I'd invite you to come in and really commit to the next 7 weeks of having a transformation in your life. This is going to be such a powerful transformative experience. We start on March 28th with the Radiant Energy Method, and we are literally diving into the interconnectedness between the energy and the emotions and your physical body and being and vitality. And so we're going to activate the body's natural capacity for regeneration, and you are going to experience it for yourself in your own body, in your own life, in your own awareness. And it's going to be absolutely fucking incredible. So you're going to find the link in the show notes. Again, send me a DM if you have any questions at all. I am at your service. And until next time, stay curious, stay present. Remember, you are a spiritual being having a human experience, and you can connect intimately and concretely to that spiritual self, to that soul. And that soul has a blueprint. It is a light being. It is an energy being. And it is here in your body as a vessel to bring forth something really powerful into this world. You chose to be born at this time, in this body, in this incarnation, and don't leave without your music coming into this life. Okay? I hope you keep finding harmony in your everyday life. We will see you again soon.
That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.